Welcome to the Surviving Siblings podcast. I'm your host, Maya Roffler. As a surviving sibling myself, I knew that I wanted to share my story, my brother's story. I lost my brother to a homicide in November 2016, and after going through this experience, I knew that I wanted to share my story and his story. And now it's your turn to share your stories.
I have, you guessed it, another incredible surviving sibling with me. I have Teri Gosselin with me. Teri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'm so excited to be here and to be connecting with other siblings.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you here too. And a little bit of a teaser for this episode, you're going to be sharing your brother Joey with us. And Joey had a syndrome that I am not familiar with. So I am in for a treat today to get educated. I like learning. I'm a big learner, Teri. So even though, of course, it's awful that you lost your brother, Joey, you're going to get the opportunity to educate me and probably so many siblings on this episode. So, before we get into that, Teri, take us back in time. Tell us a little bit about you and Joey, your family growing up, your relationship. Share that with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. And actually, it'll probably start the Marfan Syndrome story early on because this is part of our story, our family story. So, yeah, I grew up the oldest of three. And mom and dad, we were born and raised outside of the DC metro area in Maryland. And normal upbringing, great neighborhood, all the things where you have friends and you just feel like you are surrounded by, your neighbors and friends become family as well. And it's interesting, like, how it becomes full circle later on in life. And so growing up, I'm 5 years older than Joey and 8 years older than my sister. And as the oldest, I already had taken on that whole, like, mama role when my brother came around. I just, obsessed, adored him. I had just turned 5, and it was just like my little big old baby who looked like an old man when he was born. And he was a big baby. He was 10'6", so he was
Oh
a
my
big
God.
one.
Yeah, he was a
Yes.
big one. Yeah.
Yes. And, yeah, I mean, he would look completely different. My mom, dad, and I, we all have, like, the dark hair, and my brother was born, and he had, like, this blondish, reddish hair with blue eyes, and, I just loved him. I was his sissy, all of those things, and then around 3 years old, we started noticing that he would be watching TV, and his eyes would be down, but he'd be looking up, and so he went to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor put him in glasses and said, I think you should go and talk to your pediatrician about something called Marfan Syndrome. Have you heard of that? And we hadn't heard of it. This is now 1989. So didn't know what that was. So my mom took him to the pediatrician and they were like, yeah, I think that, does anyone in your family have it? And we didn't know what it was. And they kind of started naming off characteristics. And it was, really tall, eye or vision issues, really flexible joints, and, lanky sort of bone structure, like various different things that then my mom was like, wait a minute. This is also sounding like my husband.
Wow. So she was like checking mentally, just going check, check,
Yeah.
check. Whoa.
So
Okay.
then they were put in touch with Johns Hopkins University. We were about 45 minutes away from there. So thankfully, they had people who were very familiar with Marfan syndrome, which is a genetic connective tissue disorder. And it's rare. And not a lot of people knew about it then, so much so that if you were to look in a medical dictionary back then, there was literally a paragraph about this disorder. And the part of it I remember reading, because I was about 8 or 9 years old, at the end was most people with Marfan syndrome die before they're 50. So cue freak out because here we are now trying to see what this is. Does my dad and brother have it? My mom is now pregnant with my sister. Do I have it? Does my mom have it? We didn't even know what it was. So we started going through testing. All 4 of us got tested, and it came back like the genetic testing, blood work, some other like heart testing because it does impact many systems in the body. And we found out that my dad and my brother had it. My mom didn't, obviously. It is a genetic disorder, and I did not have it. So it skipped me for whatever reason. There's no, 50-50 chance basically of getting it. My dad is the first in his family to get it. So it's some sort of anomaly, and whatever gene that my grandmother and grandfather had together created this. And he's the only one out of his 5 siblings that has it. So then my sister was born, and we didn't know if she had it because my mom was pregnant. And then once they were able to do the testing, they learned that she also has it. So
Ah,
yeah. So this was a major impact in our family because we had to understand, first of all, are they all okay? What does this all mean? Is there medication? What kind of treatment? Are there groups that we can connect with other families because we've never heard of this? What resources are available? So it was a lot of that. And I just remember being really confused at 8, 9 years old about what was happening. And then also, as I got older, starting to take on this other role in my family at that point because I was now the only sibling that didn't have this. So I was privileged to be able to not have to go to the doctors all of the time, not to have restrictions on sports and playing for fear of injury or like a serious, significant injury or sudden death, which happens with when you have it's usually an aortic dissection. So there's a lot of complications with it because it is connective tissue. So there's so many systems impacted. And my brother, he didn't have too many, other than the eye vision issues and the height. I mean, he was 7 feet tall when he passed away.
what, Terry? Oh my gosh.
Yes, so tall. And my dad wasn't that tall. He was only 6'2", 6'3", so pretty, a little bit above average, but not
Right.
unusual. But my brother was tall and thin and wore glasses pretty much his whole life. And then my sister, she had more of the bone issues. So she had a concaved chest and had to have a bar in her chest. She had really severe scoliosis and has a bar in her back. Has had a couple of nose jobs because of the cartilage shifting. So she's had a lot of those kinds of impacts. And then just to add now going forward, my niece, my sister's oldest daughter, also has Marfan syndrome. But things have come so far compared to when we first learned about it.
Yeah.
So just being able to see the treatment and what's available is incredible. So yeah, growing up was one of those things where, first of all, it was our normal, so it didn't feel abnormal, but also it was one of those situations where I started taking on that sort of the strong one role even early on. I sort of wore that hat as an extra protector of my siblings, especially if anyone was making fun of them because they were so tall and thin. And, you know, it was it was our experience. It was just what it was. It was what we were used to. And, my brother was also the annoying little brother. He
Yeah.
had a real knack of just getting under my skin, which I think, siblings have that tendency to be able to find what makes the others kind of tweak. And he had that. But I'm grateful that as we were growing up and we got older, that I had completed college and, he was older and we started spending time together. And it was less of like feeling that major 5-year gap and more of like coming into adulthood and feeling that.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, he passed away at 22. So we didn't have a lot of time to spend getting to know each other even deeper on that level. But
I feel like siblings hit their stride when they get into, like, college and, like, when you leave home, and, like, that's when, like, a lot of us develop these deeper
yes.
relationships, and I feel like you guys were just getting started with that, and, Oh my gosh, Terry. So what happened? Again, we're really learning and getting educated on this because I had
Yeah.
never heard of this before. Maybe you guys listening have heard of this, but it's one of the reasons I love doing this show is because it also can create awareness to things that we don't normally talk about, especially for my perspective because I lost my sibling so suddenly. So I typically really understand people who have lost their sibling to addiction, overdose, because my brother struggled with it, homicide, because that's how I lost my brother, right? Those are things that I just instantly connect with really deeply. I've learned more from siblings like you who have lost a sibling to a terminal illness or an illness or like cancer. So, again, I enjoy getting educated on this, but what exactly happened
Yes.
and because, they can I guess the average is 50 that they live to, or, like, do we have more information on
We
that now?
have
And
more
then
information on it now. So,
okay.
at the time, they didn't, like I said, have a ton of information, and now with where we are, I mean, goodness, there's so much information, and there's so many medications and, surgeries, and things are just the technology and the advances are incredible. So, at the time in that book, that encyclopedia, it did say 50, but that actually is not the case. And the reason why it actually is super important to talk about Marfan syndrome is because so many people don't realize, and there's a lot of athletes who go undiagnosed with it. And that's where you may have seen some professional athletes and college athletes that may have had an aortic dissection. Like there's like Len Bias, I believe, who played for Maryland basketball. He died on the court, and they believe he had it, and he had an aortic dissection. So there is a lot more information, but still not enough out there where people may have, or they may not meet the same characteristics, but they have something going on. So even just one of those things is enough to say, hey, maybe you should go see a geneticist or go and see this specialist. So I will say that actually healthy. My family goes every year for annual checkups at their respective hospitals. They get an echocardiogram. They have other tests run just to check on the status and make sure that, in particular, things related to the heart are not growing that require open heart surgery or some fix.
If you've lost a sibling, trust me, I know exactly how you feel. I'm Maya. I'm the host of the Surviving Siblings podcast, but I'm also the founder of Surviving Siblings Support. I know that going through this experience is extremely difficult, whether you've lost a brother like me, a sister, or perhaps more than one sibling. Trust me, we know exactly how you feel. So that's why I started our Patreon account. You can click below to find out more about our Patreon. If you join our Patreon group, it'll give you just a little bit of extra support that you need along your journey as a bereaved sibling, or as we like to call it, a surviving sibling. We offer monthly support groups. We offer a free copy of our grief guide that is actually found on Amazon. It's called the Grief Guide for Surviving Siblings. We also offer direct messaging to our community and to me for extra support. And we have incredible events. We have workshops throughout the year that you'll get access to, and you'll also have access to our summit that happens annually. And so much more as you'll connect with a community of surviving siblings that understand the journey of losing a sibling. You can click below to join us today and also check out some additional VIP features that we offer. I hope to see you in the group, and until then, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.
So I will add, because my dad learned at 30 years old that he had Marfan syndrome because my brother was 3, my dad was 30, and he had played sports his entire life. It explains his lengthy medical folders from my grandfather was in the Air Force, like super lengthy stuff. But at 35, my dad had to have open heart surgery. And I'm grateful because if we hadn't figured out that Joey had it and that my dad had it, my dad may have passed on from an aortic dissection in his mid 30s. And that would have been catastrophic, right? To have, you know, 3 young children navigating this.
Right. Poor
So
mother. I can't even imagine. I'm sure she's beyond grateful as well. Oh my gosh. She would have
absolutely.
been this young mother with these young kiddos and
Kids.
oh my gosh. And too, that really needed a lot I mean, gosh, I
Exactly.
can't even imagine what you would have gone through too. I mean, you've already been through so much. So yeah, and 35 is so young to have
So,
open
yeah,
heart surgery, but 35 would have been even younger to die. So it's a very good thing
exactly.
that you had this information.
Exactly,
Okay.
and I'll add to that that my dad
Mhm.
is doing well, has never had needed another heart surgery, and he
Awesome.
just turned 68 on Monday.
God, happy birthday, dad. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing. That's
So,
awesome.
but going back to Joey, so he was doing just fine. He'd actually had just gone to his appointment, like, the fall before his passing. He
Okay.
died in May 2008, and, yeah, it was shocking. It was actually a sudden death, not expected at all. It was exceptionally even more complicated because I was getting married 3 weeks later.
Of course you were. Oh
Of
my gosh. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, I can that morning, I was at work, I was chatting with my mom about, the florist and, like, last minute stuff because here we are paying our contracts and everything else. And, then I was doing something at work, and I get a call from an old friend who was random on a Wednesday morning, and I picked it up, and he was like, "Have you talked to Joey today?" Like, "No, I'm at work. I've been talking to my mom. I think he's probably at work. It's a Wednesday." The next day, he was going to be going to my husband's bachelor party, so I knew he was finishing up the work week. And he's like, "Oh, well, maybe you should try and reach out to your family or try and get in touch with him." And, like, when you start to feel like something crawling up the back of your neck and kind of getting, like, that
Mhm.
weird feeling, I was like, "Okay," and I just thought it was really odd, had no context, no idea. So then I started calling my mom, my dad, my sister, the house phone, the work phones, and no one's answering. My brother's not answering. Now I'm thinking he's been in a car accident or something has happened and maybe he's at the hospital and everybody's busy. But I'm like becoming frantic at this point because I can't get in touch with anybody and I have no idea what's going on. And I just have now this feeling like something is wrong. I didn't think what was wrong was the situation though. And then finally, my dad answered and he told me, "Joey's dead." And he was waiting because he had called my fiance, now husband, and told him. And my husband was going to come and pick me up from work and take me to the house to be with my
Mhm.
family. So I had to learn over the phone what had happened. And just to add to this, the reason why my dad didn't want to tell me over the phone is my dad was actually a counselor at a cemetery. So he counseled grieving families. And then he ended up becoming like the director of the cemetery throughout. That was his career. So it's just interesting. But it's also really interesting when it's your own child that you now have to share about and you think you're doing are trying to do the right thing and being in professional mode, but it's also trying to navigate the most difficult, painful conversation you've ever had in your life. So we didn't actually know what had happened. He died in his sleep. And my sister, who was just 18, found him because she all of a sudden heard this radio in her room. Her room was next to his. And she's like, "What is happening? Did he, like, leave his alarm, like, on or whatever?" And she went in there and found him, and he had just passed in his sleep. We're not 100% sure. We did send for an autopsy, and they believe that it was based on an arrhythmia, and ultimately, after talking with the physicians at Johns Hopkins, they believe that it was all just connected to Marfan syndrome, but there was no real definitive reason why. We have, like, our own thoughts. So the night before he passed away, he had actually just bought a house. He had just
What?
closed on a
Oh my
house with his
gosh.
best friend, and they were celebrating. I think he probably had a lot of caffeine, he had a couple beers, had Taco Bell, like, having a celebration. And my brother, a big guy at 7 feet tall, it's wonder, like, once he went to sleep, maybe his heart just couldn't catch up. That's kind of how we look at it, but there's no other real reason. So based on that, it is related to the Marfan syndrome, but no real definitive answer. But it left me with, you know, some of the most painful firsts I've ever experienced.
Sure.
Never lost anybody before. And then to have and usually it might be a grandparent or something, but to have your first loss be your little brother 3 weeks before your wedding day, very
Well, that was my next
complicated.
question for you. Yeah, that was my next question for you, Terry. Like, how did you even make it through your wedding? Because there's a lot of siblings in our Facebook group, in our support group, the things that we do that tell me stories like yours all the time. So your story is going to be so helpful to so many, especially women that, very common right before my wedding or right before I had my child, and so it's like these big milestones that we go through as women, and our brother and or sister didn't get to be there, so I'm curious how you handled that. How was that? I'm sure you guys had representation of him at your wedding, but how did you get
Mhm.
through that? 3 weeks,
Yeah,
holy crap. Yeah,
it was hard for sure. So obviously, like, we didn't have some of the traditional things that we would normally have had because my fiancé was going to be going for his a bachelor party literally the day after my brother died. That was obviously canceled. I didn't have a bachelorette party. So, like, some of those things that, you look forward to in the planning and the preparation, when the unexpected happens, those things fall out the wayside. So, um, we didn't have that prep, and I was still trying to come to terms, like, I wasn't even thinking about my wedding when I found out what had happened with my brother. I just needed to on that way up there on the drive to my parents' house, I just needed to get there. I just needed to be with my people. And the very
mm,
first thing my mom and dad said to me is, "The wedding is still gonna go on. We're not canceling it." And, looking back, I've had to work on some therapy with that because I felt that the pressure to then, "Okay, I've gotta keep going. I've gotta do this." And I didn't even know if I was ready to do that because my
I get
world
it.
had just been turned upside down. And it had nothing to do with my husband. Of course, I still wanted to marry him, but
Right.
it was just like, I can't even see what a step forward looks like right now. So I went through the motions those few weeks, obviously grieving, in shock, trying to figure out. I mean, after he died, his funeral was not until the next week. So now we're at 2 weeks before the wedding day. And we're in the last bits of stuff. Like, people are coming into town and getting ready to keep him as part of the day was so important to me at that time. And also making sure that my parents and my sister, and that's where the being the strong one started to come in. I started that shell just came kind of right back in. Even though I was grieving, I stuffed those emotions down and was like, well, I need them to have something too. So one of the first things I did, I went to, like, Things Remembered. I don't even know that's still around anymore. But I had
I remember
You
things
remember
remembered.
it?
Yes, I definitely do. I definitely do. I'm about the same age as your brother, so we're not
Okay.
far apart from each other. So yeah,
Yeah.
I know things remember. Oh my god, I remember things remembered.
Yes. And so
Flashback.
a
Yeah.
total flashback. Yeah, so I went and I got a pocket watch for my dad engraved, and I had a
Mhm.
photo put in of him and my brother. I got lockets for myself, my sister, and my mom, and I put the different photos of my brother with that. Each of us had, like, a photo with that and engraved. And I had wrapped my locket in my bouquet, and they all, they wore their stuff, but I felt just very, like, because my wedding weekend also happened to be Father's Day. So, in between, after my brother passed away, my sister had a birthday, and I got married, and it was Father's Day. So, it was, like, a lot of stuff, and all I
That's a
could think
lot.
about as I'm picking these cards out was, "Oh my gosh, this is my dad's first Father's Day without his son, his only son." And, like, it was just I just remember it being so, like, I still remember be standing in the aisle at Hallmark, picking that out. And so, I did these little things throughout my wedding, like, even going down the aisle, the space remained where my brother would have walked. And, there was my beautiful friend who has also since passed. She knew my brother well. She had spent time with him. She, in those 3 weeks, put together this most beautiful slideshow that incorporated my brother in it. And I treasure it, like, I still watch it to this day, and my parents will go back and watch it, and it's just these little things, and, we had, like, the photos and stuff like that at the wedding too, and, you know, I felt it was really hard to walk down the aisle because the 2 weeks before, I had walked behind my brother's casket down that very same aisle in that church,
Yeah.
our church growing up. And I just remember at his funeral feeling so numb, and then walking down the aisle with my dad feeling so, like it just, like, hit me, right?
Right.
Because I didn't think about it until I was standing to go down that aisle and realizing what, like, what had just happened, these major life events, so intertwined in the very same fashion, and a lot of emotion that day. And then there was also these beautiful things, which I didn't realize then, but about 5 years ago, I had an opportunity to be a published author and write a book chapter, and all of that came forward after my own healing and the reflections of my wedding day and the experience that it was, and we had a massive it was so hot that day. I'm a June bride, and it was, like, the hottest few weekends of the year across the country, and all of a sudden, during dinner time, it starts like a downpour. Now, our wedding reception was in a tent. It was fine, like, but the wind is whipping. Apparently, that's flickering with the electricity. Now they're worried because they hadn't served the food yet that they're not gonna be able to. It's gonna be cold or they can't finish, you know, coordinating that. And honestly, anything else that had happened that day, my wedding day, for me was not important. Like, all the things I'd planned for, you wanna make sure everything goes perfect. It no longer mattered to me because the absolute worst thing that could have happened, happened. So,
Right.
everything else was just like, "Meh, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out."
Mhm.
And so
Oh, the church hasn't burned down, everyone's alive, we're good.
yes,
Yeah, it changes your whole perspective on life, Terry. I love that you're sharing this with
totally.
us because it really it just changes everything.
It
And I
changes
think
everything.
and I really think I think that's such a huge moment in your story too, about walking down the same aisle. I can't imagine doing that, Terry. There's so much strength in you. No wonder you're gonna be talking about you always talk about being the strong one, and Terry's gonna be talking about this at our summit if you're coming this
Yes.
year in 2026.
Please
Could be
come.
listening to this
It'll be
episode at
great.
any time, but yes, and we'll talk more about it as and when we conclude, but I feel like this is such a this is kinda like the heart of your story is walking
Yes.
just I'm picturing you walking down this island. I'm also picturing you like, "Oh, like, this is supposed to be the happiest day of my life," and you've probably got 5,000,000 emotions. You were
Yes.
just numb doing the same thing, a few weeks before. Obviously, you were doing something different. You were commemorating your brother and honoring your brother. But, like, now it's supposed to be the happiest day of your life, your wedding day, right? And, like, you're feeling all the emotions and all the feelings, and it's not what a typical bride would be going through, right?
Yes.
So, I feel that intensity when you're sharing that, and then now with the storm, which, by the way, we're in the South, right? So, like,
Yeah.
rain on your wedding day is actually good luck. So,
Yes.
hindsight's 2020 with that, sure, I'm sure too, but yeah, I mean,
Well, and that
I just picture you letting everything go, just being like, "It doesn't
yes.
matter, my brother died," like,
And
everyone
that's
else.
exactly it.
Yeah.
And the rainstorm, after reflection later on, I really, like, saw how powerful that was. It felt to me, and this was only after the healing work that I've done and the therapy I've done, was realizing, like, that rainstorm was my brother showing up and helping to cool off the how hot and humid it had been,
Mm.
to show us that he was crying tears on that wedding day, that he couldn't be there in person, but he was there in spirit. And then left the most gorgeous sunset I've ever seen that still is emblazoned in my memory almost 18 years later. And all of that, like, this is as I look back, I realized just how deeply I was already spiritually connected to him at that point and didn't realize it until years later because that's a whole other journey that I've taken over these 18 years.
Yeah.
But just being able to know, like, there were these moments in the saddest time of my life but also so embedded in the happiest times of my life and the happiest experiences. And I think like that's why, I've done the work I've done and the stuff that I see constantly in life is just how connected grief and joy are all of the time. And that has literally been a theme throughout my whole life, but even more so after the experience of losing Joey and then in subsequent losses and experiences along the way. And of course, all of those, it doesn't like make it easier, right? It's all their own experiences and it's all what it is. And we often navigate how we feel and allow our feelings to be what they are and not stuff them, not be the strong one all the time. Like, strength is important, but actually being, like, emotionally connected is the strength. But I had to learn that. And it's just been really a beautiful journey, and he, in the spiritual realm, has helped connect me and show me this grief and joy, and that the grieving part, I had to go the journey I did with challenges and understanding my emotions, on not feeling them, on stuffing them, on being the strong one all the time, and almost kind of putting on like this mask or armor in order to protect myself and my nervous system. And then also my questioning with God and that connection to get to the point where I was open to then see like there's a different way. And he was just there the whole time, waiting till I was ready. And now we just have a different relationship. Obviously not in the physical, but we're still connected. And it's one that I'm so grateful for. And I think at the time, I wasn't even sure that that was possible, right? Like, how is it possible to remain like you'll just be a memory or you're just in pictures? But he's still there, and I see it now with my kids, like, I see it. My oldest hit his first home run last Friday, and then a second home run on Tuesday of this past week, and it's like my brother was a massive baseball fan, and I can just each time I've never been more elated as a mother to feel what I believe my child was feeling in those moments, but also knowing my brother was watching and
Yeah.
cheering him and there, like, you could feel the presence.
Mhm.
And just even in the little moments, like I've gone to a medium a few times and had connect Joey came through in those
Mhm.
sessions, and it was very
What was that like
special.
for you?
Oh my
Yeah, what was
gosh.
that like for you? Look, I talk about this on the first season of my show. Look, if you guys listen to me on TikTok, a lot of you do, a lot of people come into my room and they think I'm a medium. I'm like, "No, this is sibling loss support." Although I think we all have psychic
I
abilities and
agree.
we're connected. We think we just shut it off sometimes. But that's a whole other podcast, Terry. But anyway, but I always tell people, I'm like, be very careful. There are gifted people out there and there are people that are not so, right? So protect yourself because when you're grieving, you're very vulnerable. So it took me 5 years, Terry. And I talk about it on the first season. And I did a lot of research. I sent an email to this person from an email that wasn't really mine. I gave them no information. And it was a blown away experience. If you guys haven't listened to it, check out the first season. I talk about it. But how did you find your media? Were you kind of guarded like that too going into it? And I recommend that because especially when you're grieving, you're vulnerable. Because sometimes I see these people and they're like, "Is my brother okay?" Or "Is my sister, thinking of me?" And I'm like, "Hang on, those are like leading questions here, right?" So, what was your
Yes.
experience like? And would you give the similar advice that I give on that?
Yeah, I think people will know when you're, like, ready to explore that because
Oh yeah.
it's definitely not like, if you're newly grieving, I don't think I would have been able to manage myself in
And I
that.
don't think it's a good I don't think it's a good thing, Terry, if you're
No,
newly bereaved, like, because you're so desperate to make connection. I find that you
exactly.
ask leading questions. I find that you try to put it together when maybe it's not someone who's legitimate for this. So,
Exactly.
yeah, I'm with you. That's great
Yeah.
advice.
So we went, I wanna say that it was, maybe 8 years later.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, and I had started doing my own work. I was get into, like, my own healing work, and I was starting to get into the place of being more open to, like, that spiritual connection. And
Mhm.
friends of mine were going to this, it was a group medium event in a local, like, restaurant, and I'd read some information about the medium coming, and she sounded amazing. And I was not skeptical actually. Like I felt very like this feels right. This feels good. My mom and my sister also came with me. They were skeptics. But we went in to this group event. There was like 50 people there. So we didn't even know if he would come through. And the way she did it, it was kind of like, she would feel into the spirits in in the room and what was coming forward and go by their first names. Joseph is coming through right now. And it's a common name. There could be other people. And they then she started saying things that were like, wait a minute. This sounds like it's Joey. And interestingly enough, as Joey came through, my grandpa came through, and then my grandmother came through too. And they were there for a while, and she sat with us, and we didn't give any information. She was just sharing what was coming through. And it was so powerful and it was so spot on. And that's where we learned like my brother comes to my sister and I as a dragonfly. And so that is actually another part of my one of my stories as well of what kind of helped with my own transformation of how to move forward. And it was just really, really amazing. My mom and my sister left and they were no longer skeptics. And they have since gone back to see her, the same medium and other events.
Oh, cool. I mean, how could you that after same thing with my
Yeah.
experience too, right? It was just like after that. And the funny thing is, prior to my brother dying, I was a total believer. I was, like, super into all that kinda stuff, right?
Yeah.
Had been to many psychics, many mediums, but death changes you, right? And you can put your guard up a lot, and you can hear about experiences, and so but going to someone that was really good and it's funny that you mentioned my grandparents came through too,
I
and, like,
love
they came
that.
through first. Yeah, they came through first, so at first I was like, "Oh my god, no, he's not gonna come through, he's not gonna come through." I'm just
Right.
gonna talk to my
It's too good to
grandparent. I
be
was like
true. Like,
right.
yes.
I'm like and then he came, like, charging through, which is so my brother's personality. So I totally get it, and I mean, what it helps you realize too is that, like, on whatever you believe in, but it sounds like you and I believe similar things. I do believe in an afterlife, and I do believe
Yes.
that spirit is on the other side, and we have people that listen to the show that are anything atheist, agnostic, all the way to super religious and
Absolutely.
spiritual, but regardless, I think it's just kind of hard not to believe that there is something after we pass because the fact that all these people that you're kind of connected to, they come through, it's like they don't understand the concept of time, it's just very different. So again, this
Yes.
very metaphysical, but I believe in that too. It's an interesting thing and it does if you are open to it, it can catapult you like in a direction in your healing journey like you're describing.
100%. And again, and I would just, preface again that you have to be open and ready for that part.
It was 8 years. I mean, what a great
Yes.
I mean, for me, I'm so glad I waited. It was almost 5 years, and
Yeah.
honestly, even then I was a little raw, but when people are like, "Oh my god, it's been a couple months, I'm gonna go," and I'm like, "I wouldn't." I'm like, "I
Yeah.
wouldn't." But, each to your own, each to your own, do what you wanna do. But I think, when you're open and that could be 1 year for some people, that could be 10 years, that could be 20 years, but it can be a really healing part, and I love that you have this symbol now for your brother, the
Yes.
dragonfly. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
And actually, anytime I was just at Target last week in like the dollar section, they had this little makeup thing that had dragonflies on it. So it's like, okay, hey, Joe, how's it going? Like, that's how it is now when I'm out and about. And I picked one up for myself and my sister because, you just feel like, and she'll do the same thing, like pick up a little something here and there that just, you feel like your brother's presence. And this also happens to be his birthday month. So it just feels like, that just it's he's there. He's like, "Hey, don't forget my birthday." Like, I'm gonna be 40 this month kinda
Yeah.
thing, and, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Joey and I are the same age then.
oh,
Yeah, I'm right behind him. I'm turning 40 this year as well. So, yes,
a
Joey and I are
happy
the
early
same age.
birthday.
Thank you.
You're
And you know what's
welcome.
so funny too? I work a lot, as you guys know who listen to the show. I'm a busy gal. But I made this commitment to myself, especially going into 2026. I was like, I'm going one day a week, whether it's Wednesday, Thursday, whatever day I can do this. I meet a girlfriend for lunch.
I
I
love
just
it.
do that's something I do to get out of the house, right? And during the week, right? Weekends, not the problem. It's during the week where you're just so. And I went to this really cool tea place in town. And guess what were on my glasses this week?
Dragonflies.
dragonflies, and I'm doing this show with you today. How
I love it.
weird. I just got kind of chills. So this tea room is really cute. We've been wanting to go for a while. We actually rescheduled twice because things were just getting so crazy. And each tea like table is a different theme. And we happen to sit at the dragonfly. I'm gonna have to send you the picture because
Oh,
this is
please
too
do. I would love
that
that.
that I just did that 2 days ago. So, yeah, so we had tea and did the dragonfly, like, theme. It was just like, this is so weird. I'm gonna have to send you the picture. This is so weird that this happened this week, but,
I love that. My brother was
wanted
with
to
you
ask
too.
Yes, I know. He was saying, "Hey, you're gonna talk to Teri this week."
Yes.
Little did I know. Little did I know. So, I have to ask you this too about your sister. So, your surviving sister that is 10 or 8 years younger. I have a sister who's 10
Yes.
years younger, so it was a little Freudian slip there. How is your relationship with her? Obviously quite beautiful. And how is she doing because she is living with this syndrome, and how is her
Yes.
health?
So she's doing great. She is, just she's a great mom. She's busy. She also now works for it's so interesting how things kind of come full circle. She also now works for a cemetery and she's a manager of a cemetery. So it's like runs in the family.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you guys need your own reality show and just open a funeral home
Apparently.
or something? Oh my gosh.
And
Like,
so but, it's like she's really compassionate and has such a good heart and really good with people. And so it's like she had come previously, she was the manager of, like, a salon spa. So, like, different completely different area of work,
right.
but she just naturally fits in it so beautifully. And yeah, health-wise, she's doing great. She's married. She has 2 little girls. As I mentioned, my older niece also has Marfan's. She also just had scoliosis surgery back in October, but she's doing fantastic. She healed way better than my sister's surgery. So you could just see the advances in
Right.
the procedure and everything. And yeah, I mean, my sister also has like a little cookie business on the side. She's an incredible baker. Emotionally, my sister and I are really different. I am one, like, even though I stuff things down, like, I feel a lot. So can be moody. I'm not gonna lie, it is what it is. I cry at silly commercials on TV. Like, and my sister is not quite as sentimental in things. I will say she's become a bit more since becoming a mom.
I was gonna say, well, she's a mom, so that's a given.
Yes.
You gotta, like, an instant up the ante on the empathy and, like, the
Yep.
sensitivity when you become a mom. Yeah,
Yes,
gotcha.
and it's definitely more for her kids than, like, she gets a little
Sure.
like, we just had we my birthday was in January, and we didn't get to see each other because of the weather. So, we just saw each other for my son and my dad's birthday this past weekend. She gave the gift, and I'm like, "Oh, this card is so sweet," and she's like, "It can't be too mushy because, I just can't do it." So, like, that's just how she is,
Too
but
funny.
she
Yeah.
processed differently, she doesn't really like to talk about it too much, and given that she found my brother, and she was only 3 years age difference with him, so they spent a lot of time together, they were really close, and I can imagine and it was hard for her for sure. She was in serious shock, I mean, she was a teenager, and it you're losing your built-in best friend, right? But
Totally.
she didn't really talk about it. She didn't really go to talk to anybody. She decided to navigate things in her own way. And that's another beautiful thing is that everybody's grief experience is different and how they navigate
Mhm.
it. And there's no right or wrong way. There's just your way and finding what feels best for you. And so, you know, now like when we talk about things, it's obviously time is balm. It does help. Doesn't ever go away. You miss out on, like, Joey missed both of our weddings, the birth of our children, being an uncle, what his life would have looked like. All those things we missed out on. But we do have each other. And with each other, we've been able to have our memories, share our memories of growing up with him. It's more of like the jokes always come through of like my brother was famous for giving us every Christmas the same sweatshirt and Tic Tacs, like for years on end, and
Such a
just
brother thing to do.
right.
Yes, yes,
He's
yes,
like, "Here's
totally
the
is.
sweatshirt, and your breath stinks, so here you go." And it's just he's always at a family event because we always talk about him. It always comes up, and it's no longer like one where you're going to break down and cry. It's one of those places where you feel like it feels like your heart's smiling. It feels like sunshine when you get to bring your loved one that's not physically here anymore to be in the experience that we're in right now. And so I'm grateful to have her, and have the relationship we do. It was a little harder growing up because I am 8 years older. So when I was like in college, she was really pretty young. But now we're adults and it is, we're a lot closer. And then we can relate on the mom thing as well. So that's always nice. But yeah, now like so I grew up in the Maryland area and all my family lived there. But about 9-ish, 10-ish years ago, my sister, I guess 9-ish, my sister and her family moved to Wilmington, North Carolina. And 5 years ago, my dad retired and my parents moved to Myrtle Beach. About 2.5 years ago, we got the opportunity where my husband got a promotion in the Raleigh area. So we got to move closer and still be,
Oh
you
gosh,
know,
you guys aren't that far from each other then. That's really nice.
no,
You
like
can walk.
2, 3 hours. It's much better than
Mhm.
6 and 8 hours.
Oh, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
it's interesting, like after I got married, I still lived in the area, but I was still like about 40 minutes from my family. But about 9 months later, we started looking to buy a house. We ended up moving to the town I grew up in. My sister was there, my parents were there, and I just felt like this desire and need to be closer to them because of the experience we had the year before with losing
Sure.
Joey. And so, it's one of those things that's like sometimes grief and loss can break and kind of separate people. Ours brought us closer in more of this tighter unit. So it's nice to not be too far away from each other and be able to meet up and spend weekends and enjoy each other's company.
I love that about your story because not everybody's story is like that. And I think it's so important. I love having people on the show where they have a positive experience with family. I remember the first season I was interviewing people, I had a woman on from Australia. She does she has a big grief website in Australia. Great woman, Margaret. And my family was so dysfunctional after my brother was killed. And it's the story for most families. Not all,
Yeah.
like you, right? But like I was hearing it all the time. And so having her on, she was like my first one to tell me, I don't have the typical story. We actually got really close. And I
Yeah.
was like, wow, to the point where because she had worked in grief for so long, she actually was like, I developed a name and I teach this name for it. And I'm like, what? Yeah. And every time I have someone on that has a story like yours, it reminds me of it. But she was like, it's a grief bubble. And it's
Mm.
where, like, when everybody leaves right after the celebration of life, funeral, whatever you have, and things calm down, which for you was crazy because you just went right into your wedding. So you really didn't have that. It was just like a flip of what you were supposed to be experiencing. But she was explaining that, most families like that bubble never creates because of all the dysfunction that typically happens or gets highlighted, which I was like, yeah, you're describing my whole experience.
Mm. Yeah.
But she was saying that like her brother's, partner and like the family, just the few of them kind of just hung together and just mourned together. And then when they were ready, they would kind of leave the bubble and then come back to it. And it was just such a beautiful representation of what a healthy grieving family can do together. And you're not always going to be perfect, right? I'm saying like this is not like Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, like everything is perfect, right?
Oh,
Like there's still going to be things. And that's what I love about your story too, Terry, how you've been super honest. Like I had to go through therapy. I had to work through some things because, I didn't agree necessarily with where my parents brought this up or did that, right? But you guys respected each other's grief enough, which I also love you sharing about your sister and how she grieved differently because that's something I really struggled with. I was like, why isn't everybody angry like me or doing it
yes.
like me? And I had to learn the hard way. Not everybody grieves the same. It doesn't mean that they're not grieving. So, again, this is such a great episode for people to understand the different dynamics in the family, but also understand even if you're going through it differently or feeling it differently, it is still healthy and you could still
Yes.
feel close as a family. So your story is a real testament to that. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's inspiring because and also it's never too late too because been exposed to so many families that had a rough go of it and now they're close again.
Yeah.
So, it can evolve as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think like, you know, time is And as you process, even if you don't realize you're processing, that creates space to then see whether a relationship can be rekindled or reconnected or, come back. So I agree. It's never too late. And it's always, I'll go back to, I believe in divine timing. And so I think, it could also be that loved one orchestrating that divine timing for reconnecting back with family and loved ones, friends, you know, or it can also be sometimes that separation is also needed. I mean, it's
Yeah.
sometimes that's exactly what is needed as everyone navigates their journey. And there's no wrong or right way, and it's all exactly as it's meant to be.
I couldn't agree with you more. I absolutely agree with you. Teri, well, we'll just preview this real quick. So we've kind of talked about it already. Teri's going to be at the summit for 2026. So if you're hearing this in 26 and you're coming to the summit, we would love to see you there. And Teri is going to be talking about being the strong one. That's what she's going to be talking about. And as we've kind of teased it today, she has tons of experience with this. I'm the eldest too, so I totally connect with you. Like it's almost something that's automatically put on our shoulders, right? And
100%.
so many of us have been chatting about that already in our Facebook group. I was sharing with Teri today too. So Teri, just a little brief blurb. What can we expect from your session, and then we'll talk about where to find you.
Yeah. So, yeah, we're going to talk a lot about what being the strong one might look like. You might feel like it, but you may not really realize that some of these things are already inherently probably like, again, oldest child, oldest daughter. That's definitely some of those kinds of things. Um, but also some simple tweaks on in reframes of what that actually could look like and how you could take some of that pressure off of yourself to simply be. And I think it's so important. Like we can be the strong ones, but then also be strong and feel and be strong and be present. And it doesn't always mean you need to put up, this front of taking care of everyone else before yourself. And so we're going to kind of go through that, and there probably be some immersive sort of experiences with just being present and being with yourself in the process and what you're navigating. And yeah, I'd love for anyone to join us. I think it will be a really beautiful conversation, but it'll be an open conversation. I really hope that everyone is
Love
interested
it.
in having that convo with me.
Love it. Well, I would have been, where was this for me years ago? So we're trying to bring all the stuff we wish we had. So I loved your
Absolutely.
session. I'm so glad we connected. Teri, where can people find you? And we'll put it in the show notes. What are your best socials, email, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me over on Instagram at Soul Glow and Alchemy. And also that's the same as my website. It's www.soulglowandalchemy.com.
Okay, awesome. All right, Teri, thank you so much for sharing Joey with us and your family and educating us on Marfan syndrome. I did not know about this. And the more we talk about stuff like this, just the better it is for everyone. So thank you. And we're
Absolutely.
so excited to have you a part of the community now.
Thank you so much, Maya. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Surviving Siblings podcast. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did creating it for you, then share it on your chosen social media platform. And don't forget to tag us at Surviving Siblings Podcast so that more surviving siblings can find us. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Surviving Siblings Podcast. All links can be found in the show notes, so be sure to check those out too. Thank you again for the support. Until the next episode, keep on surviving, my surviving siblings.